So, do you mind if I start recording now? So is this the whole farm? Hi, Amy. So my brother did a whole project with having hydroponics tied to his aquarium tank. So it was a pretty yes. So as far as I understand it, it's a similar process, but the nutrients come from not from fish.
Right. Yeah, not man-made.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to see the way it works and anything you want to show me.
That house is a Dutch bucket hydroponic, which is suitable for larger plants. We have in there are tomatoes, pepper, and eggplant in that greenhouse. This one is it's known as a suspended pot hydroponic. It doesn't require any circulation or aeration or anything like that. It's all on its own. And that is good for the smaller greens, which we do a lot in there.
What about those fans? Is that something just to keep the air moving inside?
Yeah, that's for ventilation. We used to use the roll-up sides, but we're trying to not use that because it cuts down on pests in the greenhouse. We can keep that closed as much as possible, and we've started even screening the fans. We can keep out more of the insect.
And I see you still have stuff growing in the ground, so you're not...
Yeah. Well, we've tried a lot of stuff hydroponically, but certain things like root crops, it's not worth trying to do it hydroponically, so
right.
they're just best in the ground.
Root crops, you mean like potatoes,
We do potatoes, beets, radishes, turnips. Yeah. We even found kale. We like that better in the ground because that's more of a continual harvest. So, but that way we can do a little bit of everything. So we do have stuff in the ground and stuff.
Why don't you show her this?
This one first?
And then I'll put the fans back on and we'll switch.
Oh, okay. Unfortunately, they can be a little loud. See, those are the ones that are still on the solar panel. So you notice when a cloud comes over, they'll slow down, and then they speed back up when the sun is full. So this is in full production year round.
The furnace, and we have grow lights. Here, I'll put them on.
Yeah.
You can see even in the bright sun. Here, go ahead, shine down that way.
Oh, I see.
LED grow lights, yep. So that way when the days are getting shorter in the wintertime, we can still have full production, and it still is within the same time frame. The plants are in the trays for about 2 weeks. Then they go into the tanks, and this time of year, they're generally done 4 or 5 weeks after that.
Okay, this is
this
week.
Yeah, those were just seeded last week.
That was Monday.
What is that?
Lettuce.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are all different lettuce varieties.
What are the things around the lettuce?
Well, that's the cubes that they're growing in. Here, you know what? I'll separate one so you can see.
It's rock wool. It's spun volcanic rock.
We did it in the grow media like that. It would get very dirty inside the bag.
Yeah.
So to make sure it stays clean, we do the lettuce this way. And being that the cube is inside the bag, it keeps moisture on the lettuce plant. It actually makes them last
And then
longer.
these over here were this week.
And that's also the volcanic
that's
rock?
the rock wool cube.
You said it's spun rock?
Yeah.
Volcanic
Wow.
rock, yeah.
Basically, there's no real leftover waste from that. It's just spun. It's spun volcanic rock.
Does it have any minerals inside, or it's just like a
not
medium?
It's glass.
Wow, those are beautiful already. Those are ready for the farmer's market, right?
Probably
not
next
yet.
week.
Next week.
Yeah, probably next week. These will be ready. We started building these cages. The bok choy is really susceptible to insects, more than anything else that we grow in here.
Really?
So this was an experiment to
So
see
then you don't spray anything.
without
and you
spraying
don't
if
have
we
to-
can keep the bugs away from
And we
the
only
bok
use
choy.
organic sprays, but still, it's better to not spray
We'd
anything.
like to not spray it at all. So, and then it also keeps the insects from spreading around the whole rest of the greenhouse. And it actually worked. We harvested from one of these last week.
Yeah,
so
the first time.
it worked really well. I think it delays the crop by maybe a week because it is shading it, but the plants came out perfect.
After they grow in that spun volcanic rock, you move them to like this is the hydroponic
Yep,
whole
once they're
environment.
in here, we fill the tank with water all the way. The benefit to the suspended pot is you don't need the aeration. What's going to happen is as the plant drinks that water down, the top of the roots are going to get exposed to the air, and that's how the roots will get the
So
oxygen.
this
that they need.
uses no energy at all.
So there's no
Once
aeration.
you pump the water in, you're done.
Right. Where
Okay.
if you've ever seen the floating raft system, it's always on the surface of the water, so there's no oxygen getting to the roots. So they have to aerate that water. We have a 2-part nutrient that we mix in. It's a powder. Dilute that in, fill the tank, plant them, and then there's nothing to do until harvest. Literally, there's nothing to do.
We just wait for them to be ready.
Once they're done, we harvest, refill the tanks, replenish the nutrient, and start all over again. As soon as one crop comes out, the next one goes in.
We have to replenish all of the water every time, and you have to add all the nutrient every time.
Okay.
Where they do it, they just add nutrient water to their system all the time.
It's a continuous
This
system.
has a little bit more process to setting it up, but once it's set up, you're done. Whereas the other one has less setup process, but it's a continual process.
I see. I don't know if you want to talk about this now, but I'm curious, we spoke about this on Facebook. I'm curious about your impressions of why this is more sustainable and better for the environment.
The amount of production that comes out of this house, we have each hole. We have what, 1,500? What did we say? How many holes do we have
In this house, 1,600.
1,600 holes in this house that we are harvesting
9 times a year.
each hole. Each hole. If you're doing that same kind of production out in a field, you're talking about
You might be
acreage.
getting, and you might be getting only 2 harvests or 1 harvest a year from these crops, especially in our region here where it's cold.
Right.
But the big thing, it's not even that, but I'll show you, because some of our stuff is done what you would say we're not an organic farm, but we do it the way you would do it. This pile of compost
Oh, mushroom compost.
is 3 times bigger.
That's to amend all our outdoor beds.
1 crop in the outside garden. In there, we use less than a 5-gallon pail of material. And we use no fossil fuels to, really, I mean, you wouldn't have to have the heat. We do the heat so that we have 12 months a year production.
Right.
But you wouldn't have to do that. We didn't do that in the past. But we do have one greenhouse that's in production right now that's completely off grid and doesn't use any fossil fuels or anything.
7?
Yeah.
So what you said this is mushroom compost.
Mushroom compost. Pennsylvania is a very large producer of mushrooms. So when they do a new crop, they have to take all that compost out and they have to start fresh. So they end up, their waste is that compost, but there's still a lot of nutrient in there that can be used to grow crops. So they sell that to the local farm, so it's readily available. And it's a great source of nutrient for the plant.
And it is a waste product.
Right.
Yeah.
But just trucking that large amount of material
Yeah.
from southern Pennsylvania uses more fuel than we use all year.
Also, one of our big reasons for doing hydroponics, if you see this pile of rock here, that was actually just off of the surface of the ground. When we leveled the pad for this greenhouse here, that's just what was scraped off the surface. We don't have a lot of soil here. We have a lot of rock.
Yeah, I noticed.
It's to be able, that garden we've been amending for 15 years. To have soil in there that still rocks come up in, and I don't even know how, still rocks come up in that garden. So to be able to expand our production really instantaneously, we can clear any surface. It can be rocky. We can clear any surface.
It could be a parking lot in the city. It doesn't make any difference.
And we can start with hydroponic production and be producing almost immediately. So we're still filling this house up with tanks, but this is no heat, no lights. So this house is mainly, we'll start using this in the springtime when the weather's, when you get out of that brutal cold.
Late April, early May.
And the days are getting longer, and then we start planting in this house, and that rate can raise our production for the summertime.
We'll get 6 to 7 crops a year from that one tunnel, whereas outside you might only get 3 or 4. If you're lucky, you'll get 3 or 4.
Oh, the control box.
These are huge.
Yes. We just started to see some ripening. We picked a couple the other day that are just starting. So we're hoping to have them at the farmer's market within 2 weeks. But these were seeded in February, and they were in here in middle of April. The growth with hydroponic tends to be a lot faster.
It's faster, bigger, healthier, because they're getting all of the nutrients they need all of the time. And you can have them in a tighter spacing because you don't have to worry about getting enough nutrient from the soil.
Right.
And so then this greenhouse produces, which is only 1,500 square feet, but really my tomato space is only 1,000 square feet. And I produce what you would produce on a quarter acre of tomatoes.
We should be able to
Which
harvest
is about
over.
20, if you want to say that's 20 times what we make outside.
Once we're picking, we should be able to harvest about 300 pounds a week just from the tomatoes. So this system is different in that each one of these plants is in a bucket of perlite. There's a dripper line that runs to each one of the buckets. It keeps a reservoir of about 2 inches at the bottom of the bucket, and then the excess drains. And that drain runs back to the tank that's in the ground. Each one of these rows has its own tank that's right around 100 gallons to supply. And then they're on timers, which run a few times a day. They run and then drain back.
Is this also on the solar?
No, this
Yes,
is...
this is solar. No,
this is solar. Yes. That's the control panel down there.
The control, the pumping system in this house is completely solar.
Okay, so this is the control panel for this whole house. So each row has its own timer that's set to run a few times. And they take turns because it is on the solar system. You don't want to use too much power all at once. So they're staggered. So as soon as one row turns off, the next one goes on. And then it keeps going down.
And that's designed by us.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Buy that. Yeah. Everything you see is
Wow.
we built everything ourselves.
Yeah, this is all home built.
What do you guys call it?
Just the
Well, this is
tomato house box.
this is Dutch bucket hydroponics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's just a home built system instead of buying one from a commercial business.
That's very impressive.
Very cool.
I see.
That way we can check if something happens to get clogged, which it does happen now and then. If we notice a plant wilting, we can turn it on, check the drippers, and make sure that everything's running okay. And then this is the tanks are down here in the ground. They're just about 100 gallons each. Twice a week we add nutrient in here. And then there's a float valve that keeps the tank. They actually use a lot of water. There's a float valve that keeps it full. And we often get frogs in here. In the tanks. In fact, I know there's one living on the other end.
And this whole system now runs off of only 400 watts. And we don't use a lot of. It's not like where you see they have hundreds of solar panels. We just have 4 and then 6 to run the fans. So it's 1,000 watts of solar panel.
We got bell peppers over here, and we have a hive of bumblebees.
Wow.
Because we stopped rolling up the side, the bumblebees can't get in to pollinate, and we needed them to pollinate. We had flowers by, was it end of April?
Yeah.
There were open flowers, so we needed them to pollinate right away, so we ordered a hive with pollinators. We normally have tomatoes at market by the 4th of July, and I think the big difference this year was the bees, that we will probably have them in the beginning of June now. So they're going to get us tomatoes at market a month earlier.
So what are you going to leave the bees there for next year, or
No,
are you going to?
unfortunately, it's not really a living hive. There's no queen. What they're sending you is just a box of workers. I don't know what the lifespan of a bumblebee is, but they live out their life, and then that's it. That's the end of that hive, and then we order another hive. We should have actually another hive coming pretty soon.
Now this house is completely unheated, and we do have tomatoes.
That's the cherry tomatoes, and that's why they're so small, is because this is an unheated house. So we had to wait. We had to wait to put them.
That's carrots.
Carrots, yes. They should be ready pretty soon.
Is the cover that you use to
that's
stop
the
from
cover.
freezing?
It comes in different weights. That's a pretty heavy weight. But that's just for some additional protection since this isn't a heated house. Yeah, it's just a blanket. Since it's not a heated house, the temperatures at night, you don't have the sun to heat it up at night, so those temperatures are going to go down. So it's like the zucchinis are susceptible to the cold, so we just give them a little cover when it gets chilly like that, and then it's enough to protect them.
What do you think the sustainable future of a large population looks like? So do you believe that there is room for regular, in soil type of organic farming? And
I think,
or do you think that most of it has to come from hydroponics, and then some that really require the soil can stay in ground?
I think the mix is the best.
Yeah,
honestly,
absolutely.
a mix is the best. But everything in greenhouses, there's so much loss that you can't, like, most I read about the organic farms, and we're not an organic farm, but we that's who we're, because we're a small farm, we associate with them. They spend a day a week, a whole day, washing and cleaning greens to take them to market. We don't spend that day because there's nothing.
The hydroponic. Well, the hydroponic.
Well, even
greens,
this inside, there's
Yeah.
nothing. There's nothing to wash
Yeah.
ever.
Everything is already clean.
So you took now that in a 5-day week, I took 20% right there. There's 20% less labor. That way, I think the future is growing by natural sunlight as much as possible in greenhouses and using the best method possible. Like the lettuces do amazing in hydroponic, but the kale is better in the ground. So grow the kale in the ground, or carrots. You can't grow carrots I mean, I guess you could.
But
why?
I don't think there's a benefit to it.
There's no benefit.
Just the high tunnel itself, if you look at the weather that we've had recently, there were frosts last night. For a grower who's all outdoors, they just lost a whole bunch of their crops.
And if they didn't lose the crops, even if it's, say, the kale is now set back 3 or 4 days. It won't grow for 3 or 4 days because it froze last night. Where our kale, it just thinks it was a nice cool night that was 45 degrees.
Yeah. I think that
see.
protection is really needed, especially in this area.
And then also you don't get the wind damage. You don't get hail damage. I mean, unless it's a huge, massive hailstorm.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And you tend to get less disease on the plants because they're not getting covered in rainwater.
and you also get less insect pressure.
Yeah, less insect.
Not no insect pressure, but less.
So what about the externalities of growing organic outside in soil organic versus hydroponics, whether organic or not? What do you think the externalities of that are?
Define the question.
Like the effects on the environment. So I know that you argue that the runoff from organic farming is
runoff, soil erosion,
is much
Soil
more
And not just
serious.
that, but a lot of your certain certified organic nutrients are not easily obtained in the U.S. on land.
Mm-hmm.
So they're literally mining the ocean.
and they're depleting those resources.
Or they go to the South Pacific to get bat guano or seabird guano, and they pollute that. It's absolutely pristine islands, thousands of miles from anywhere, and they bring machines and they pollute the whole region and kill the reef. Mm-hmm. Now, who knows that happens? Nobody knows that happens. But you can see it if you look it up online. It's there. You can see the pictures of the dead reefs because they wanted to produce organic vegetables. They had, instead of using phosphorus, which they can mine out of the ground here in the U.S., we can get it. That already has a mine there. We do the best cleanup of anyone. They're most responsible. Instead of doing that, no, we go to some third world country on the other side of the world in a pristine environment and pollute it. Whereas if we use a synthetic, it's made it's an evil synthetic, but it's made in a factory here by adults, done in the cleanest possible way, which is better. And that's my problem with it. It sounds really great on paper, and in the United States it's great because we won't have them do that. But they do
Right,
that
it's
in
just
Africa,
moving the problem somewhere else.
That's exactly what we're doing.
So you said, we could be mining phosphorus. Do you mean phosphorus for chemical
Fertilizer, yeah.
fertilizer? Okay.
And you would use less. It would be less weight, less volume, less shipping, less trucking, everything. And it's done here where there's environmental controls, as opposed on an island in the South Pacific.
What about nutrient density? I actually wanted to ask you about something you mentioned that I'm not really familiar with, but you mentioned that the amount of sugars in a flower or in a plant, it depends on the stress level that the plant received during its life. Can you explain that a little bit?
No. This is opinion. Okay. I will state.
No,
that.
I read this somewhere else as well. That's why I'm curious, from a person who knows what
First
he's
of all,
talking
they use
about.
the Brinks test. It's called a Brinks meter. What the Brinks meter does, and it's common in our region to use for checking maple syrup. People will know what it is. For checking maple syrup, it tells you how much sugar is in that maple sap before you start, so you know how much to boil it down. It gives you an idea, okay? It also checks not just sugar, but dissolved solids. So if it was salt, the Brinks meter can't tell the difference between salt and sugar. So it doesn't have any way to know. But a way to tell a quality melon, for instance, if you were selling watermelons and you're in Georgia, A way to tell that they're done is they take and they put a spear and they take out a sample and they squish it up, they make the juice, and they look at the juice, what's the sample? Well, in watermelon, the sample is sugar. That's what's left in there. And they can know if it's a sweet melon ready to harvest or not. Whether it's fully ripe or not, or fully pink, does it have enough sugar? That's what we really care about. It'll turn pink over time. It's come into practice, especially in Eastern Europe, where some of the, let's say the fertilizers aren't as pure as we get here. They may have heavy metals in them. There's a lot of issues with that. They have a lot of troubles in Eastern Europe. And a way to check that they don't have excess fertilizer is with the Brinks test, because if it has excess fertilizer, it'll show up as really high on the Brinks level.
I see.
So it shows up way high, but it's basically you had poisoned vegetables, which isn't a good thing. Okay, but we don't have that here in the U.S. You can't buy fertilizer with heavy metals in it. So the last thing they do for the Brinks test is they use it to see, they're trying to say that my vegetables have more sugar than those vegetables. Well, even in Eastern Europe, they figured out how to game the system. So if you want to show that your vegetables have more dissolved sugar in its juice, dehydrate the plant, then it has less juice. So it shows more moisture or more dissolved solids. So they literally, it's a common practice to shut off the irrigation 1 to 2 weeks before you harvest, because it artificially raises the Brinks level.
The sugar.
Oh, I see.
Concentrating the sugar by drying it.
Now the other thing that has to do where they say the nutrient, well, plants have evolved over billions of years. They can't get up and run away from a bug. He can't get up and run away from a pathogen or a soil microbe. It has to have a very large repertoire of defense mechanisms. Most of those defense mechanisms are what we call vitamins, because it works the same way in the plant as a vitamin as it works in you as a vitamin, because it acts as an antioxidant, it prevents free radicals, it does all these things. But it's also a plant defense mechanism. So if the plant has lots of these phytonutrients, it's fighting things off all the time. So consequently, it has a lot of defense mechanisms. So it's sickly. The sicker the plant is, the more defense mechanism it's going to have.
Right.
That's how it works. Like, think of the phytonutrients as white blood cell. It's going to show more white blood cell if it's sicker. So saying organic has a higher level of white blood cells, you don't eat the sickly animal because it's sickly, and we know that. We all intrinsically, you know. So when I don't have to tell you not to eat a leaf that's all covered with insects. You naturally coil away from it, just like the cow coils away. Everyone knows that already, and that's what they do on their. That's why they're washing everything, to get the bugs off.
So do you argue that organic produce is considered more nutritious because it uses less chemicals and because it's in stress mode more? Is that what you're...
It could, potentially. I have no idea why. I'm not going to say why. I don't know why. But they're posturing the fact that it has these phytonutrients. The phytonutrients are made because of the plant as a defense mechanism. Why they're there, I don't know. Now, if you had the same plant and you put it into a greenhouse and you fed it only the best nutrients, well, maybe it wouldn't have that either. Where it couldn't be attacked by pesticides or bugs or nothing. It was just in this beautiful, pristine environment.
That would be curious to see, right? Like an organic plant that's grown on a field versus a greenhouse where there are no stressors around, and then to compare the nutrient density of that.
Now, the scary part of that, and I'm not for GMO products. I'm not for GMO corn or GMO sweet corn. I'm not for that. I'm not for spraying everything with Roundup when you're going to eat it. But one of the main positives on Roundup Ready corn, for instance, is they all incorporate BT. So you don't have
Which is what?
It's a soil bacterium that when the cornworm eats that, it kills them. When they do that, the corn is no longer subject to those bugs.
Uh-huh.
So there's less cancer-causing ingredients in the corn after they make it. This is what they say.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the main arguments, is that by removing the insect pressure, you're removing cancer-causing agents.
So basically, you know, about the nutrient density, it's a little bit unclear, but in terms of sustainability and what's better for the environment, hydroponics provides benefits that organic farming might not, right? In terms of like efficiency, water efficiency, land efficiency, space, right?
Like for instance, we have 13 acres of ground.
Mm-hmm.
We use about half an acre for our farm.
Mm-hmm.
We produce as much as a farm that's farming 1 to 2 acres. And the same income that they produce. So we leave the rest. The deer come right here, right outside. The deer stand over there, and the wild turkeys.
They eat from our compost.
They eat from the compost. Like for instance, at the bottom of our property is a spring. That spring leads to a small creek. That's a Class A trout stream.
Mm-hmm.
That leads to the Staraka Creek, which leads to Susquehanna. The water that leaves our property is crystal clear, clean, and cold. There's no runoff in it at all. Mm-hmm. There's no way for runoff to get in it because it's 800 feet from our production. Show me a farmer in Wayne County that their production stops 800 feet from their property line.
But there's still water underground flowing, right? So it's still unless if you are
but we
making some sort of
our water goes with the plants.
Mm-hmm.
We also don't till for our ground crops. We don't till the ground. We add the compost. We add as a layer on the top. A lot of times when you till, all of that nutrient is leaching through the soil, and that's all getting washed down and into the ground. Well, yeah, this is all drip irrigated, so it's only getting the water that it needs. Nothing's getting washed out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and it's time efficient.
Well, that's what makes it profitable. You've got to be as efficient with the, especially since we're only using half an acre. You have to be as efficient with the ground as you can to get the most production that you can.
You know, you reminded me when you were talking about farmers kneeling down the whole day and all of that. My grandmother, she had a farm, and I used to go there every summer, and I would end up helping her because, you know, that's all she would be doing the whole day.
Yes.
And one of the number one things that we had to do was walk around and collect these beetles off potato plants, and we called them Colorado beetles, and this is in Ukraine, you know what I mean? So we like everyone knew what these beetles were because they were very, very invasive in Ukraine. And I'm just wondering, are they here? I want to see them.
They are here. You'll find them once in a while.
We're so cold.
They don't thrive.
It doesn't really. They can't live here.
Mm-hmm.
It's too cold. They live. They probably stop somewhere around Lancaster, like Virginia border, Maryland. And they'll get here.
We have seen them occasionally.
Yeah, they get here.
We'll treat with an organic spray if we see them.
But usually by that time, it doesn't.
The crop's just about done.
Yeah. I'm almost nostalgic for them because I've seen so much of them, like bags and bags of these beetles.
We get apples. We haven't had a good apple year in probably 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
we bought a cider press, and that was the last good apple year we
had.
Really?
Oh no.
So like, come on, I want to make apple cider again.
You know, the year I moved here, I think it was 2014. It was like a very strange year because that year was full of mushrooms. Like everywhere you would look, starting spring, I would see mushrooms. And I remember I'm a big, mushroom person. I pick them, I know them. And, my first year here, I'm like, wow, this is an amazing place. Like we're going to have mushrooms every year. I'm going to like dry them.
Never happened again, right?
Never, not once.
Why we started hydroponic production.
Oh yeah, look at that.
This was the reason?
That's our property.
And we plant carrots right there.
Right there. Because we start a new bed and we fill it with compost and to establish the bed.
So this is like the Plymouth Rock of Bialecki Farms.
Honest. It is. And it looks like we built a rock wall around the greenhouse, but we didn't. That was just
from here.
That's just excavation. We didn't build a wall. That's just excavation to level out the
That's just pushing the rock off.
That was it. That's just the surface.
It looks like a Japanese rock garden, to be honest with you.
It really does. It's insane. for leveling out the pad. And it was like, well, this is why we grow hydroponically. That is the reason.
But now hydroponics you can grow on marginal land. This would not
you
be.
can do that anywhere.
This, as farm ground, would only be for pasture.
We're 2,100 feet in elevation.
Oh, so
the
this is a
climate
high
could be a little more extreme.
high altitude.
Yeah.
That's why all the trees still look like horrible. They killed the ice storm.
And you can see a lot of broken tops on the trees. We get a lot of wind and ice storms that can really snap the tops of the trees. It's stressful on them.
If you don't want to produce year-round, you can produce 8-9 months a year literally without much input to that. Very low. You're not going to get much growth for 6 months of the year in our climate.
In
now,
those
if you were
short days,
if you were further south, you'd get more. But if you were looking to homestead, like set up your own homestead, this could produce all of your needs. Like I mean, this.
Like one of these.
Just this. It could, all of the tomatoes, all of the fresh produce you could eat for the year, and it's 1,000 square feet. And you didn't show her the Bialecki.
Oh, the underground. No.
Yeah.
In fact, the majority, what would you say, 75-80% of our income only comes from that greenhouse.
Right there.
That-
Well, those
the
two
lettuce.
is 80%.
That's it.
So
It's mostly
this
comes
is
from the
this is
hydroponic
like 60%, and that's the tomatoes are 10. I mean, this is very, very profitable.
This was the first small house that we built for our starts, for our seedlings. It's actually mostly underground. And the point with that is because we want our tomatoes, we're starting them in February where it's still really cold. We do have a heater in there, but because it's insulated by the ground, it doesn't take a lot of heat to keep it warm. But once we
because it's in the
heated the
ground.
lettuce house, then we just started putting our seedlings in there.
Wow.
I actually was growing baby greens in here.
This was the first.
This was where our seedlings first started, was in here.
Come in. It's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, climb in. So these shelves is where I would have had my seedling trays, and then I filled that bed with perlite. We've grown ginger in here
Yeah.
Wow.
because it actually becomes this hot, moist environment. It becomes very tropical in here in the summertime and get quite hot.
And Ginger likes
Ginger
water
loves it.
and heat.
Absolutely loves it. So we've done ginger in here, and this is what's left over of my baby greens that I did.
I see a little wasp building a nest.
Oh yeah.
Oh, is he?
It'll get too hot.
Yeah?
Yeah, he's not going to
No,
like it in
it's
here.
really
Well,
good.
there's actually a roof vent down at that end, which
Yeah,
it
open.
helps to pull the heat out if it gets really hot. I haven't opened that because we really don't have anything,
We don't have anything in here.
producing in here right now. But
But we would have this working in February. We'd shovel the snow off the roof, and it would be heated all day. You know, at night we use blankets. We covered this with concrete blankets, so it doesn't use any heat. Like it really doesn't use any heat.
concrete blankets, yeah, it's essentially they're made out of plastic so that they can be outdoors. But when they're pouring concrete, you have to insulate it in order for it to cure properly. So it's an insulated blanket that they use, but they're meant to be outdoors, so it was perfect to put over the top, just to hold that heat in during the night, so we didn't have to use much heat.
We moved up here to homestead the property, and I took, and it's funny. We call the lettuce we sell at the grocery stores, we call it broken plow hydroponics. And there's a story behind that. See, we bought this property, and I went to one of the auctions, and I bought a plow. I had a little tractor, bought a plow, hooked it up, and I came down here because when I walked around the whole property with a shovel, kicking it in. Now, where can I find the best soil? That was right here. I hooked it up to the tractor. I went 40 feet and snapped the shank off of that plow.
Too many rocks.
And so it took us about 10 years to find a way
To
to make money
we could
on this
farm
little
large
homestead.
scale on this property because it was obvious plowing the ground was not going to happen.
Yeah.
And that was probably the last time that we tried to plow the ground.
Yeah, oh no,
Yeah.
it was literally the
The first and the last.
And it's the reason I heard that, that's the reason why Pike County doesn't do a lot of farming is
Oh, no.
because it's so rocky.
No, yeah, they
Right,
can't.
right,
Now they
yeah.
have up here the little bit of our soil is very thin, but what we have is very good.
Okay.
In Pike County, they have clay, which is it's the opposite of good. It's very heavy, dense soil with shale. So they have very thin soil that's also clay. So it doesn't do. No, there's I think Wayne County has 600 farms, And Pike County, I think, is like 26 or something. Like,
Yeah.
there's just not, it's not none, but there's none.
That's the flower.
Wonderful.
We are Stan and Amy Bialecki from Bialecki Farms. You can find us locally at the Hawley Farmers Market in Hawley, Pennsylvania. We're also in Berryville, New York, Livingston Manor, New York, and you can order from us at bialeckifarms.com.